Masechet Megilah, Daf Yod Gimel, continuing our long derasha on almost the whole book of Esther. This is really unique that we have, because all of our midrashim on all books of Tanakh are all from Eretz Yisrael, and this is one of the very, very few midrashim continuous that we have from Bavel for almost the whole Megillat Esther. So we're continuing. We were talking about the word Yehudi, and we said that Mordechai, although he's not from Yehuda, is called Yehudi because anyone who denies idolatry is thereby called a Yehudi, like Yehudi, someone who believes in the oneness of God. And related to that theme, we're also going to talk about, related to Parashat HaShavua, the Bat Par'ah. Bat Par'ah, who saves Moshe, is not named in the Torah, but there is a name of a certain Bat Par'ah mentioned in Divrei Yamim, and the Midrash is going to relate the two together. Here we go. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, ki ava petach b'divrei hayamim amar hachi, kol devarecha ehad hem, ve'anu yod'im ledorshan. Rabbi Shimon Pazi, when he would talk about the book of Divrei Hayamim, and if you ever read Divrei Hayamim, you know it's just mostly long, especially the beginning, a long list of names of families. And you wonder when you're reading this, who are these people, and why do we need to know all the family lineages? And he says, in fact, all the words of Divrei Hayamim are one, and we know how to explain them. What it means by this is that we're going to see a whole list of names, and we're going to and the Midrash is going to say they're not talking about different people, they're not that are related to each other, but they're all descriptions of one same person. The point is that many of the names here are actually symbolic or symbolic names for certain people, and are telling us descriptions about them. So let's see this example. V'ishto haYehudiya yalada et Yered avi Gedor ve'et Cheber avi Socho ve'et Yekutiel avi Zanoach ve'ele bnei Bitya bat Par'ah asher lakach mared. So there's a woman who was a Yehudiya woman, and she bore children. And it looks like these are all different people, right? Yered and the father of Gedor and Cheved and the father of Socha, or Cheved, who was the father, and Yekutiel, who was the father of Zanoach. All these are the sons of Bitya, the daughter of Par'ah, who Mered took. Okay, so we don't know these people. It's hard to identify them. Is this the very same Par'ah as the Egyptian Par'ah, as the one from Shemot? Is it someone else? Okay, the Peshat is very difficult to understand, and that's why the Midrash comes to save the day. Amai kari la Yehudiya. So it says this Yehudiya is actually Bat Par'ah. So why are you calling her Yehudiya? She was Egyptian. She was not Jewish. Al shum shekafra ba'avodah zara dichtiv ateret bat paro lirchos al hayeor. Because she rejected idolatry, she rejected her father's ways and all the Egyptian gods and all that. So therefore, she is called Yehudiya. As we said, anyone who rejects idolatry and believes in one God, you don't have to be related to Yehuda to join in and be part of the group, part of the nation. And then it says that she went down to wash in the river, in the Nile. And we're understanding that as going to the mikveh, right? She went to the river to convert. And that was her conversion process. So there you go. And once you convert, you are a Yehudiya, even if you're not from the tribe of Yehuda. She went down to purify herself from the idols of her father's house. Yalda, and now it says that she gave birth. But she didn't raise Moshe. So we're assuming that all the children that are mentioned here are all different synonyms, different names of Moshe. But you can't, if it is Moshe, she didn't give birth to Moshe, she only raised him. This teaches us beautiful teaching that anyone who helps to raise an orphan boy or girl in his house, it's like you gave birth to them. And this really, beautiful. Sometimes there's people who unfortunately have difficulty having biological children, and if they raise orphans, then that is counted. That's the same thing. A wonderful mitzvah. Okay, Yered. Ze Moshe, v'lama nikra shemo Yered sheyarad lahem l'Yisrael man beyamav. So the first of the children, right? If you look back in the pasuk, is Yered, and then this is Avi, who was the father of Gedor. But we're going to take these as all separate names. So why was Moshe Rabbeinu called Yered? Because the man came down during his day in his merit. Gedor shegadar pirsoten shel Yisrael. He was the fence fixer because he fenced in any breaches of the fence of the Jewish people. Like when there's an enemy coming or when there's punishment coming upon them, he would stand in the breach and protect the people. He was the connector because he connected Bnei Israel with their father in heaven. He protected Bnei Israel like a sukkah offers protection to those in it. Yekutiel shekivu Yisrael la'el beyamav. Moshe was also called Yekutiel, which were combined, making two words. Yekav, like to hope for, to trust in Hashem, and he taught Bnei Israel to trust in Hashem. As Noach shizniach avonotem shel Yisrael, that Moshe Rabbeinu, he caused the iniquities of the Jewish people, lezniach, to send them away, to be disregarded, and by asking Hashem to forgive them. So these are all actually synonyms for Moshe and descriptions of his qualities. Now, three of the names over there says Avi, 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 right? These people they're not separate people, but yet it was the father of Gedor. So what's with those three names that have father in them? And this teaches us Av b'Torah, Av b'Chochma, Av bin Viut. Moshe Rabbeinu was the father of Torah. He taught wisdom, and he was the greatest prophet. And that's why it says Av three times. Ve'ele b'nei Bitya. Asher lakach mered, v'chi mered shemo, v'halo kalev shemo. So this is based on a tradition that the context of this pasuk is actually about Kalev. And so the Kalev married Batya, according to this. So why are you calling him Mered? That Mered took her, his name is Kalev. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yavo Kalev shemarad ba'asat meraglim, v'yisa et bat paro shemarada b'gilule bet aviha. And so this is also, his name is really Kalev, but he was nicknamed Mered because he rebelled against the advice of the spies. He's the one that was very courageous and said, no, we can go in, don't listen to the spies that said it's too hard for us. And so because he was rebellious against something negative, so too the daughter of Paro rebelled against the idols of her father's house. So they were a good match for each other. Okay, really fascinating. And this is just one little snippet of various midrashim on Divrei Yamim that take all the names there to all be metaphors and learn tremendous amounts of traditions from those names. Okay, Asher Hegla Hogla Mirushalayim. Now back to our verse by verse explanation. Mordechai was someone who had been exiled from Jerusalem. It's not clear if he himself was exiled. The timing wouldn't really work out very well if Mordechai, because the exile was way before Mordechai lived. So you have to say Ben Kish Ish Yemini. It's not he was exiled, but his great grandfather was the one who was exiled from Jerusalem, and Mordechai was from that lineage that was in Bavel. Okay, but anyway, Amar Rava shegala me'atzmo. Rava says that when it says he went into exile, he was not forced, but he went on his own. He saw everybody was going. They're probably deriving this because it says Asher Hogla Im Hagola. He was exiled with the exile. What do you mean he was with the exile? So that makes it sound like the people were going into exile, and he said, "Wait for me. I'm going to come with you." Perhaps because he felt like his leadership was needed in exile. Maybe no coincidence that Rava says this. Rava is living in Bavel, and maybe he feels the same thing, that he is living in exile, even though technically he could move to Eretz Yisrael. There were Amoraim at the same time living in Eretz Yisrael, but perhaps he feels like the community in exile needs him. Vayhi omen et Hadassah, Karila Hadassah ve'Karila Esther. Now Esther has two names, right? He brought up, and her name was Hadassah, and she is also Esther. Well, why does she have two names? Tanya, Rabbi Meir Omer, Esther Shema, ולמה נקרא שמה הדסה? על שם צדיקים שנקראו הדסים. וכן הוא אומר, והוא עומד בין ההדסים. So her real name was Esther, and her nickname was Hadassah, meaning myrtle, because righteous people are compared to myrtles. And we see in Zechariah, in his first prophecy, he sees a man, an angel, standing among the myrtles. And so myrtles are associated with righteousness. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hadassah Shema. This is no opposite. Her real name was Hadassah. ולמה נקרא שמה אסתר? על שם שהייתה מסתרת דברי השלמד, and Esther מגדת את עמה. So she was nicknamed Esther because she concealed her identity. So Esther sounds like lehastir, to hide. As it says, she would not tell anyone where she was from. Rabbi Nehemiah Omer, Hadassah, third answer, Hadassah Shema, ולמה נקרא אסתר? שהיו אומות העולם קוראים אותה על שום Istahar. Her real name was Hadassah, which makes sense. It's a nice Hebrew name. And she was nicknamed Esther because the other nations would call her on the name of Ishtar. Ishtar associated with different, either Venus or moon or planets, but was also the name of the Babylonian goddess of beauty and love, Ishtar. And so this actually makes a tremendous amount of sense that her Jewish community, her own family, would call her a Hebrew name, and she had a foreign name because Hadassah was like, what was that name? And so she, especially as queen, she needed a name that everyone would recognize. And that would explain why she has this kind of foreign name. But does parallel Mordechai, who has a name the same as Marduk, also Babylonian head of the pantheon. Ben Azai Omer, Esther lo aruka v'lo kesara heta ela benonit kadasa. Yet another answer that she was called, her name was Esther, but she was called Hadassah because she was not too tall, not too short, just right. Like a Hadassah, a myrtle tree is nice, just right. Here's a myrtle tree, right? Nice size. Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha Amar, Esther yerak roket hayta v'chut shel chesed mashuch aleha. Esther was greenish. That doesn't, it sounds like something bad, but what they mean is that she had a Middle Eastern complexion. She had a nice complexion like a Hadass, and she had a grace, a divine grace strung around her. She had a beautiful appearance, and that's why she's called Hadass. That also has a beautiful appearance. Ki en la avaem. The pasuk is repetitious. First it says she has no father and mother, and then it tells us that her father and mother died. Well, why do I need to know both? Right? Just tell me her died. I'll know she didn't have a father and mother. Lamali amarav acha iberata metaviha yeladata meta imaha, to show that they died young immediately. When her mother became pregnant, the father died, and when she gave birth, the mother died. So she never had a father and mother, not even for a day. Okay. And so the Peshat sounds like that Mordechai adopted her as a daughter. That would fit with the theme before of adoption. And so Mordechai then raised her. Tana mishum Rabbi Meir, al tikre lebat ela lebayit. Now there's just a yud, one letter difference between a daughter, and bayit means house, but it means a wife. In Aramaic, the word for wife is debitu, of the house, the person that takes care of the house. So he actually married her as a wife. וכן הוא אומר, ולרש אין כל כי אם כבשה אחת קטנה אשר קנה, ויחייה ותגדל עמו ועם בניו יחדיו, מפיתו תאכל מכוסו תשתה, ובחיקו תשכב, ותהי לו כבת. This is in the parable that Natan HaNavi comes and tells David when he wants to accuse David and said, you have everything, you're rich and you have a whole lot of wives, and you go and take Uriah's one wife, poor guy, Bathsheba. And so how's he going to tell this to the king? So he uses a parable of a poor man. He only has one little lamb, and this other guy comes and he doesn't want to kill his many lambs for a guest. and he takes it and eats it. And this one lamb lay in his bosom and was like a daughter to him. So we're asking about that analogy. Well, if you say that this lamb, he loved the lamb so much that he lay with it in his bosom like a daughter, that's a wrong analogy. It should be like a wife. So there we should reread it as it was like a wife to him. So too here should be a wife, and actually makes sense over there because the analogy of the man with the lamb is to Uriah and his wife. So since the nimshal there is a man and wife, it does make sense that it would be like a bayit. Okay. Now, then it says that Haggai saw Esther was so beautiful, and so he rushed her process, and he gave her this 7 maids to take care of her. Why 7? Oh, well, Esther used this to know when Shabbat was. Right, she was kind of closed off from the rest of the Jewish community, and so it was hard. And I guess they didn't have regular weeks, and so it was hard to know when Shabbat was. So she knew whenever this certain maid came in the rotation, this was Shabbat, and this shows that Esther kept Shabbat even though she was in the king's palace. By Shaneha et bet na'adoteha, and Haggai, the head of the women there, he advanced her and her maids, and he gave her everything she needed and put her in the best place. Amarav shechilah ma'achal Yehudi. In the same pasuk, he says he gave her the rations. Now, what kind of rations? What did she eat when she was there in the king's palace? Did they have kosher food? Rav says yes, she got the kosher meal. Right? Don't worry, she kept Shabbat. She kept kosher. She kept everything. That's Rav's opinion. Ushmuel amar shechila kadele de hazire. Shmuel says no. They fed her pig thighs. Okay, this is quite different. Now maybe they had intention to give her the best. Right here, we're going to give you the special delicacy, and the question is, did she eat it or not? Tosafot says chas v'shalom, she didn't eat it. But she says she had to eat it. She had nothing else to eat. What could she do? She was an anusa. It is interesting that if you remember a few dapim ago, Shemuel was that single opinion that said that Megillat Esther is not mitemei yadayim, right? It's not considered one of the books of Tanakh. He said it is Ruach HaKodesh, but it doesn't have the same status. And you wonder if there's a connection between what Shemuel says here and there, if in fact they fed her pig and she ate pig. So this is not really a great example for people to aspire to, and therefore, you know what? Maybe Esther is not not a holy book. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Zed Onim. Rabbi Yochanan says she got the vegan meal, right? She just had seeds, vegetables. And we can learn this from Daniel when he was chosen to be one of the king's advisors, and so the person taking care of them gave him lots of food. He says, no, we only want vegetables. And he says, no, how are you going to be strong? He says, try it, right? Give us vegetables. And turned out that he and his friends his Jewish friends who were eating vegetables were stronger than everybody else. So you see, Daniel was very careful when he was in a foreign court to eat only kosher. And so that would be a good analogy, good example. And we could say the same thing for Esther. Okay, but all these are answering basic questions that we have. Esther, how did she live as a Jewess all those years that she was in the king's palace? And so the Midrash comes to answer those questions. Shisha chodashim b'shemen hamor, and then to prepare the woman before in the beauty contest before they came to the king, they would sit for 6 months in oil of myrrh. Okay, obviously these are all exaggerations and again making fun of the Persians. So my shemen hamor, what is this? What is oil of myrrh? The Bichia bar Abba Amar setakt. It's a Greek word called this aromatic oil. Rav Huna Amar shemen zayit shelo hevi shelish. Rav says It's take olives that are they're not fully ripened, only a third ripened, and you get the oil out of them. It's very strong. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer an pakinon shemen zayit shelo hevi sheli shelo masachinoto shemashir et hase'ar umaden et habasar. And we have a braita that also says similarly, calls it an pakinon, oil from olives that only a third of their growth, and it's good for skin because number one, it removes hair, and it also makes the skin soft. And so they had the women in that type of oil. So Achashverosh, he was sleeping with his hair and with all these women in the beauty contest. And it says every day in the evening one would come. In the morning she went back to the harem. Mitato bayom. This pasuk explicitly is saying something negative about him, how licentious he was, right? Every night he was with another woman. But Rabbi Yochanan points out there is one good thing to say about him, which is that he did not have relations during the day. Only at night each of these women would come, and so that's a good lesson to be modest and only be with his wives at night. ותהי אסתר נושאת חן. אמר רבי אלעזר מלמד שלכל אחד ואחד נדמתה לו כאומתו. We saw this midrash already, but this is the main source. Everyone thought Esther was beautiful. How could that be? Everybody has different tastes. Everybody, likes look of their own nation, and so this shows that Esther had this look that she appeared to everyone as if she was part of their own nation. מתי לקח אסתר אל מלך אחשוורוש אל בית מלכותו בחודש העשירי הוא חודש טבת. ידך שנהנה גוף מן הגוף. Okay, the pasuk says that Esther was taken to Achashverosh in the 10th month, and that is Tevet. What's significant about telling us that it was that month? Well, that's a very cold month in the middle of the winter, and that's a month when you need some body heat, and so it was Achashverosh would like her more because he needed someone to be close to him and warm each other up. So Achashverosh loved her the best. It says as a repetition here, Mikol Hanashim, from all the women in general, and also from all the betulot, from all the virgins. Why the doubling? Amara bikesh litom tam betula ta'am, tam be'ola ta'am. That when he had relations with her, if he wanted it to taste like, meaning feel like he was having intercourse with a betula, it felt like that. And if he wanted to feel like that, someone who was be'ula, who was a married woman, then it would feel like that. And that's why he liked Esther the best. ויעש המלך משתה גדול, עבד משתיה ולגליה לה. So the pasuk says he made a great feast for all the princes and servants. And then explaining that why did he make all these feasts and everything? Because Achashverosh wanted to find out what is Esther's identity. So he made a feast for her, but she didn't reveal it. He lowered taxes in her name, right? In her honor, everybody lowered taxes, and that would be, very honorable for her, but she wouldn't reveal. He gave gifts to the ministers, as the pasuk says, but she would not reveal her name. And then the pasuk says that the virgins would gather together a second time. And Mordechai was sitting at the gate. Well, what's the connection between those two things? They're gathering a second time, and Mordechai is sitting at the gate. So the Midrash is all part of the same story. Azil shekal esam Mordechai. Achashverosh went and asked Mordechai for advice. He says, "Listen, I have this wife Esther, but she won't tell me where she's from. And I tried all things. I tried to bribe her and give her honor, and she still won't tell me. Do you have advice?" Amar en isha mitkanea ela beyerech chaberta. So Mordechai's advice is that if you want a woman to feel jealous, she's only jealous of a thigh of another woman. In other words, bring the other candidates back again, and then she'll feel jealous, and maybe she'll feel threatened in her role as the queen. and then she'll give in and tell you her identity. Nevertheless, she would not say the identity, right? Because once again, says she would not reveal to him where she was from. Interesting that Mordechai would give this advice. Maybe Mordechai wanted him to find someone else, right, and leave off from being with Esther so much. So maybe he used this opportunity to get Achashverosh off her back. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Mai dichtiv lo yigra misadik enav beschar siniut shaita ba berachel zachta yasa mimena Shaul. Okay, pasuk says Hashem withdraws not his eyes from righteous, but he establishes them forever. That when someone does something good that's righteous, not only is that person rewarded, but also their descendants. And so here we're going to see a couple of examples. That Rachel was very modest, and because she was modest, she had a merit of having Shaul come from her. Shaul comes from Binyamin, who is Rachel's son. And because Shaul was modest, we'll see how in a second. Esther was a descendant of Shaul. This is interesting because there's no source for this in Tanakh. She here quotes the Targum that relates them to each other. Okay, where do we see that Rachel was modest? And here's the famous story of the secret. So when Yaakov first meets Rachel, he says, "Oh, I am the brother of your father," meaning Yaakov would be Rachel's uncle. But that's not true. Yaakov is actually the cousins with Rachel, right? His mother and Rachel's father are siblings. So why do you say, "I'm your uncle"? He should have said, "I am your cousin." So rather, here's the full conversation. He said, will you marry me? She said, yes. But Rachel warned him before. You have to know, my father is a trickster. And you will not be able to equal him. To outwit him. So when Yaakov says, "Don't worry, I am equal to him. I am his brother in being a swindler." So that's what he meant when he says, "I am the brother of your father." He didn't mean biologically. He meant that I can outwit the best of them. I can handle him. I am brothers with your father in trickery. Hinting to the trickery that he did before he came. He ran up there with his father and brother. And now Rachel surprises, but you're a great tzaddik. Is tzaddik allowed to go and use deception like that? She says yes. Pasuk in Shema says, with someone pure, you should act in a pure way. But when someone is low life, you can also act in a subtle way in order to undermine that person. So therefore, yes, I am allowed and I'll deal with it. Amad la umayra mayuta. So then Yaakov said, so what kind of deception? What's his plan? Amra le itli achta de keshisha minai vela minsib li mekamal. Listen, I have an older sister, and he's not going to let me marry before my older sister is married. So masal la simanim. So since they knew that, Yaakov says, listen, I have a plan. Here are some signs, right? A secret that we only know, a secret code. And that way, if on the marriage day, the father should try to switch you with your older sister, we will know that we'll check the code. And if whoever it is doesn't know it, then I know it's not you. And so they had a whole plan, and they would outwit Lavan. Now it came to the wedding day. And Rachel said, now my sister, I know my father's, he locked me in the room, and my sister is going there, and she's going to be embarrassed. Yaakov's going to be there at the wedding night, and what's the sign? And she's going to be, what sign? I don't know what you're talking about. It's going to be terrible. And she couldn't have her sister be embarrassed. So Rachel told Leah that secret sign. That's why it says in the morning, all of a sudden, she was Leah. You can't take that literally. What, before she wasn't Leah? In the morning, all of a sudden, whoever this was turned into Leah? No, she was Leah all along. So how did he not know? Because he asked for the secret sign, and the woman there knew it, because Rachel told Leah what it was, so that's why he thought it was Rachel. Only in the morning, then he realized it was Leah. Because Rachel was so modest and caring for her sister, that's why she merited that she had Shaul, the king, come from her family. Okay, that's the famous story. Umaseni otaita beshaul. And how do we see that Shaul was modest? Well, because this is when Shemuel went and anointed Shaul as king, and then he came back and he saw his uncle, and his uncle says, "Oh, where were you?" He didn't go and boast and says, I saw Shemuel, he anointed me, now I'm king. He didn't say that. He says, I just went, I was looking for the lamb, right? Nothing happened. So because he was modest about that, Esther, so he had Esther as a descendant. Me v'amar el azar. כשהקדוש ברוך הוא פוסק גדולה לאדם, פוסק לבניו, לבני בניו, עד סוף כל הדורות. When Hashem gives blessing and makes someone great, not only that person, but all their descendants until the end of the world. Pasuk in Yov establishes them forever and they are exalted. However, if a person who Hashem makes great then allows it to go to his head and that person becomes arrogant, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashpilo shneimar bim asurim bazikim, and if they are bound in chains and cords of affliction, then that shows Hashem, and they have behaved proudly. So if they behave proudly, then Hashem will bring them down. Ve'et ma'amar Mordechai Esther osa. The next pasuk says Esther would follow whatever Mordechai told her to do. What is this referring to? Not only the instructions of, don't tell who you are and so on, but more than that. That when Esther saw a blood stain and she wasn't sure, is this blood? Is it not blood? Different colors. So she would show her check cloths to the sages. And one of the sages was Mordechai. And so she would ask halachic questions, even though she's in the palace. She managed to do that. Kasher hayta be'omena ito, as she did when she was growing up with him. Amar Rabba bar Lima she'ayta omedet becheko shel Achashverosh v'tobelet v'yoshevet becheko shel Mordechai. Now, following up on the interpretation before that she was his wife, this means that she would be sleeping with Achashverosh, and then she would go and go to the mikveh, purify herself, and then she would go and sleep with Mordechai, and so maintained her relation. How is she able to do that? Well, she was forced to be with Achashverosh, so that's not considered adultery. There's another matter. There's a law that women can't be with two men unless you have 3 months in between, because if she gets pregnant, you need to know who the father is. So how did she do that? Tosafot says she used protection when she was, at least when she used protection with one of them, probably Achashverosh. Okay. Beyamim hahem uMordechai yoshev b'sha'ar hamelech kasaf bigtan v'teresh. In those days, Mordechai was at the king's gate, and these two ministers, Bigtan and Teresh, they made a plan to assassinate Achashverosh. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan hiksif HaKadosh Baruch Hu Adon al avadav lasot reson sadik umanu Yosef shenemar v'sham itanu na'ad ivri. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan is going to make a really interesting point that you see how events unfold. Hashem had a plan this whole time that this would need to unfold. And this happens once before with Yosef. There's, by the way, a lot of parallels, as I'm sure you know, between Yosef and Megillat Esther. One of them is that Yosef is saved from jail through the Sad HaOfim, the baker, and the butler, and the baker and the butler actually are parallel to the names of the two ministers in Megillat Esther. Because Bigtan, pat bag, this is a Persian word for bread. So Bigtan is related to bread. Teresh, tirosh, right, is wine. And so these look like they're parallel to the baker and the wine pourer. Okay, anyway, Rabbi Yochanan says, Hashem made a master be angry with his servants, meaning Par'ah became angry with his two servants, only so that he can save a righteous person, and that is Yosef. Okay, so then because of that whole story, he was there with them, and he interpreted their dreams, and then the butler got out, and he was able to remind Par'ah of Yosef, and he that's how he got out. Avadim al odonehem la'asot nes lasadik umanu Mordechai tichti ba'ivada hadavar leMordechai. And Hashem also made it so that servants would be angry at their master. Who is that? Well, that's Bigtan Vateresh, who became angry at their master and wanted to assassinate him. All that was brought about just so Mordechai could overhear and report, and thereby Mordechai had a credit with Achashverosh that he was able to use later. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Bigtan Vateresh Tarsiim Havu, Vayu Mesaperin Bilshon Tursi. Now we're going to explain, how did Mordechai know the plot? The answer is because the Bigtan Vateresh were Tarsians, and they knew this language, that it was a foreign language, and they spoke to each other in, and they figured no one else knew the language. And Bigtan Vateresh said, from the day that this one came, meaning Queen Esther, we haven't slept at all. Achashverosh is with Esther the whole night, and so therefore he's always calling upon his ministers, bring me more to drink, I need this, I need that. And so they're complaining that they can't rest. And they're that upset that they say, we're going to put poison in his drink, and that way we'll kill Achashverosh. They didn't know that Mordechai was one of the members of the Sanhedrin. In order to be a justice in the Sanhedrin, you have to know all 70 languages, because who knows who's going to come to the court, and you have to be able to interview and ask questions to the witnesses and the litigants in their original language, not through a translator. So therefore, you see, Mordechai knew all the languages, and he knew what they were saying. Amad lo. Halo en mishmarti mishmartecha shava. Now it says later that he checked it out. Mordechai reported it, and there was an investigation, and they found out what Mordechai reported was true. How did they find out that it was true? What clues? It was just a conversation that they had, right? What did they find to verify Mordechai's claim? And the answer is that in order to plot, they had a problem, because they said to each other, my post and your post are not identical. In other words, how can we leave our positions to go and get the poison and put the poison and offer it and all that, right? We are both full-time in the positions that we're doing. So one of them said to the other, listen, I'll take care of my post and your post. I'll cover for you. And then while I'm covering for you, you go and you can arrange the poison. And so when Mordechai reported it, they went back and checked the logs. They checked the clock in, and it says, oh, was this guy, was he at the post at that time? They asked the other people. It says, no, he left and someone else was covering for him. So that's how they knew it was true. They were not both at their proper posts. Now, this is after these things, Achashverosh promoted Haman. Why does it say after these things? Was a promotion of Haman have to do with what came before? This is the makkah, the blow that Hashem is going to bring is Haman coming up. But we have a principle that Hashem is always going to bring the medicine before the sickness. And the medicine is the fact that Esther is in place, Mordechai has this on the books, that the king owes him one. And so all the salvation is already ready even before the persecution happens. ואמר לריש לקיש, אין הקדוש ברוך הוא מכה את ישראל, אלא אם כן, בורא להם רפואה תחילה שנאמר כרופאי לישראל ונגלה עוון Ephraim. Rish Lakish said, Hashem will only punish Israel when he already has the solution ready for them. Pasuk in Hosea, Kirof'i Israel, when I heal, first he heals, and only then he uncovers their sin, meaning to bring them punishment. אבל אומות העולם אינו כן מכה אותן, ואחר כך בורא להם רפואה שנאמר, ונגף השם את מצרים, נגוף ורפוא. Whereas for other nations, Hashem is angry at them, they deserve punishment, he punishes them first. And then after that, when it's finished, then he'll go and create a remedy. And this is from Pasuk in Yeshaya, Hashem smites Egypt, and then after he's finished smiting, then he brings the healing, but not before. So the Pasuk says that Mordechai refused to bow, and it was too little in Haman's eyes to punish Mordechai only, and he wanted to punish because they told him the people of Mordechai, and so he heard, oh, he's from this people. So then he said he wanted to destroy all the Jews. So you see, there's actually three stages: Mordechai alone, then the people of Mordechai. Who are the people of Mordechai? That's different from all the Jews, which is said next in the pasuk. Amar Rava betchila b'Mordechai levado, ulbasof be'am Mordechai umanu Rabbanan. First he says, I'm going to take revenge against Mordechai. Then he says, no, more, his people, meaning the other sages. And then he said, know what? I'm going to kill the whole nation. He pil pur hu hagoral. Tana, kevan shenafal pur bechodesh adar, samach simcha gedola, amar nafali pur b'yerech shemet bo Moshe. So he makes this lottery, and it turns out that the lottery says a good time to go and kill the Jews is going to be in Adar. And he was so happy that it fell in Adar because Haman, he knew his stuff. He knew that Moshe died in Adar, right? We have a tradition that he died on the 7th of Adar. Actually, it's based on a calculation. We know that Yoshua, he crossed over the Jordan on the 10th of Nisan. And we also know that he had 3 days of preparation before that. And it also says that they mourned for Moshe for 1 month. So assuming that nothing else happened in between, a month and 3 days before the 10th of Nisan is the 7th of Adar. That's how we get that number. And so he says, this is a good sign because the day Moshe dies is a day of bad luck for the Jews. And so, yeah, I'm going to be successful. Here's the thing, but he didn't know, Haman did not know the tradition that Moshe was also born on the 7th of Adar, because it says, right, I am 120 years old today, Hayom. And so, meaning 120 was also his birthday, and also good, Parashat HaShavua, coincidence of Moshe's birth. Yeshno Am Ehad. Now Haman tells Achashverosh, Haman has to sell to Achashverosh, has to convince Achashverosh to go along with his plan and kill them. Amar Rava leka de'adali shana bisha keHaman. There was no one better at slander than Haman, right? You have to, it's the skill to know how to subtly accuse other people and be believable. Amar le ta nichlinhu. So here's a conversation that Haman had with Achashverosh. Haman said, let's destroy them. Amar le mistafina melohav delali avid bi kedavad bekamaeh. Achashverosh said, I'm afraid of their God. I don't want to happen to me what happened to the previous guy. The previous guy, Belshazzar, right, in the feast, the writing on the wall, and he died that night. So he says, I'm afraid. Amar le yashnu min ha-mitzvot. Haman says, don't worry. They've been asleep regarding the mitzvot. It's a play on words because he says, Yeshno am echad. Yeshno is a irregular word. It should be yesh am echad. Right? What's Yeshno? It's the same letters as Yashnu. They're asleep at the wheel, Bnei Yisrael. They're not doing mitzvot. So Hashem is not going to protect them. Amar le it behu Rabbanan. Achashverosh says, no, but there's the sages among them. And the rabbis, they observe mitzvot. Amar le am echad hen. Haman says, no, don't worry. They're all one nation. They're all the same. Even if there's a few rabbis that are doing the mitzvot, but they're all part of the nation, and the rabbis will not have merit because they are mixed in with the majority of the Jews who are not observing the mitzvot. Haman goes ahead and he offers, says, I know what you're thinking. Maybe you're afraid that I'm going to make a bald spot in your kingdom. I'm going to wipe out a whole people, and then there's going to be this empty space. And you don't want to have empty land in the middle of your empire. So don't worry, mifuzarin hem ben amim. They're spread out all over. A few here, a few there, and just get rid of them. You won't even notice. Shema tomar itana minaihu, and maybe you'll say, oh, but we have benefit from them. Maybe they do good things. No, miforad kifreda zo she'ena osa perot. They're like a miforad, which means separate, is a play on words of a mule, pereda, and they don't, just like a mule cannot produce offspring, so too the Jews, they don't produce anything for the economy. They do nothing good for society. And so you won't miss them. Shema tomar ika medinata minaihu. And then you say, well, maybe is there one whole province that they all live, like, in Judea or somewhere? And then if we wipe them out, we'll be missing a whole province from the 127. It says, no, Talmud Omar bechol medinot malchutecha. There's a few of them all over. And don't worry, they're nobody. They contribute nothing to society. You can see that the anti-Semitic stereotypes that are common till today and throughout history are all encoded in this conversation that the rabbis are presenting here. It goes further. V'datehem shonot mikol am. Their laws are different from everybody else. Because they're socially separate. They don't eat with us, and they don't marry our women, and they don't allow us to marry their women. Right? So they're separate from everyone. This is a great line. And that their religion is not the same as everybody else because they're always getting out of working. They're a bunch of lazy bums. You know why? They always say, come to work today. They say shehi is a mnemonic for Shabbat Hayom, Pehi Pesach Hayom. The point is that there's always some holiday. Anybody who's ever worked in a company, we have off. This one is Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Chol HaMoed Sukkot, Shemini Aseres, Simchat Torah. Everybody, you always have holidays. You always have off. And this was a common anti-Semitic trope, and back to Roman times, that the Jews are lazy, and that's why they don't like to work on Shabbat and the holidays. Okay, by making it a mnemonic like this, it shows like they're making fun. He's making fun of the Jews that they always have. They say this so often, they don't even bother saying the whole Shabbat Hayom. They say Shehi, Pehi. The king, it's not worth it for you to leave them and let them live. Why? Because when they eat and drink, they scorn the throne. They make fun of you, Achashverosh. How so? If a fly falls into one of their cups, so they throw out the fly, and the Jew will drink the rest of it. But if you, the king, were just to touch the glass of one of them, they would throw it to the ground and they would not drink it, because then it would be stam yanam, could be yayin nesech. And so, right, they are worse than a fly. Fly, they don't care, they throw it out, right? Okay, that actually is a true halacha. So he has a point. But it's not because of disrespect of the king. That's just the laws of kashrut. And therefore, Haman is very convincing, and now he's ready to go to the next step and please the king. Let's write a letter that they'll be destroyed, and I'm gonna give 10,000 shekalim to the treasury. Amar Resh Lakish, גלוי וידוע לפני מי שאמר והיה העולם שעתיד המן לשקול שקלים על ישראל, לפיכך הקדים שקליהן לשקליו. Shakish says Hashem knew that eventually one day Haman would give over a way out shekalim against the Jewish people to bribe the king to destroy them, and therefore he again is makdim rifuah lamaka. He gives them merit beforehand by commanding Bnei Israel to give machasita shekel right? Way before when he gave the Torah. That way, the people's giving of the shekel will outweigh Haman's payment of the shekel and will be a merit to save them. And that's why Mishnat Shekalim says that on the first of Adar is when we make an announcement that everyone should give machasita shekel, and also regarding kilayim. Kilayim is done at this point because even if you don't plant two species together and they just grow on their own, you're still responsible. So in Adar, when things start to grow, is we remind everyone, go out to your fields, check if there's diverse kinds, and pluck out one of them so you don't violate them. And now Shekalim also, even though technically the fiscal year of the Bet HaMikdash starts from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so really you could just tell people, hey, before Nisan, shortly before Nisan, tell everyone to bring Machasita Shekel. But we don't do that. We announce it on the first of Adar. Why? Because we want it to be before Purim, so that our giving of Machasita Shekel will be before we read about Haman's giving of the shekel, so that our merit will precede his evil intention. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen ve'amen.